Good morning, everybody. In this recorded session, I'll be mainly talking about standard implant surgical procedures, and if time permits, I'll continue with the advanced implant surgical procedures. After the invention of osseointegration process by Professor Per-Ingvar Brennemark at Sweden, they formed a company known as Nobel Pharma Implant System, and they started manufacturing implants. And these implants were parallel walled, cylindrically shaped, threaded implants with the external hex connection, and these implants were mainly used in the fully edentulous arches. After attaining great success in the fully edentulous arches, these implants were also tried in the single tooth or multiple missing teeth. Initially, there were transitional problems, but with the modification of the implant design, these problems could be managed. Presently, the implants mainly used are tapered, threaded screw-shaped implants with the internal hex connection. The advantage of tapered implant is that they occupy less space in the apical region of the jaw, and it can be easily managed in the narrow interdental areas. Implant therapy is the only way of providing fixed replacement in a free end edentulous situation. Patients who are unable to wear removable complete dentures or removable partial dentures and have adequate bone for insertion of implants are especially good candidates for implants. Let's see the risk factors and contraindications for implant therapy. In this era of high implant success rate of about 90 to 95%, it's very important for the clinician to identify these risk factors and inform the patient about these risk factors and contraindications. There are very few contraindications for implant therapy. Implants are successful in most of the situations, but they may be less predictable only in some situations. That's why most of these factors can be uh, called as risk factors. These factors are classified into four categories, that is medical and systemic health related issues, psychological and mental conditions, habits and behavioral considerations, and intraoral examination findings. Diabetes, as you all know, is a metabolic disease. Especially in poorly controlled diabetes, there is a patient's ability to resist infections, and patient's ability to heal normally will be affected. And in patients with the well-controlled diabetes may not experience any problems with the osseointegration. Bone metabolic disease such as in osteoporosis, which is a skeletal condition characterized by decrease in the bone mineral density. This reduction in the bone mineral density can be managed by providing a longer healing period for the osseointegration to take place, and then load the implants after providing a longer healing period for osseointegration. Patients with the history of radiation therapy, especially to the head and neck region, may not heal well after any surgical manipulation. Soft tissue dehiscence may follow after surgical manipulation, and it may lead to uh, exposure and necrosis of the bone and lead to osteoradionecrosis. This is especially seen in patients who have taken radiation dose of more than 60 uh, gray units. If implant therapy is required in these patients, uh, flapless technique should be followed in conjunction with the hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Bisphosphonate therapy, especially through the intravenous route, may get bisphosphonate-related osteoradionecrosis of the jaw. Immunosuppressive medications and immunocompromising disease, the uh, patient's immunity may be suppressed, and there may be inadequate healing, or patient's ability to heal normally will be affected. Psychological and mental conditions may be considered as an absolute contraindications for implant therapy, because these patients will not be cooperative, or patients may not understand the treatment concept. There is lack of understanding, or maybe behavioral problems. Physiologically, the osseointegrations will take place normally. That's why in patients with the mild psychological and mental conditions with the good cooperative behavior, implant therapy may be carried on. Substance abuse such as alcohol or in drugs, the implant therapy may be considered as an absolute contraindication because of the similar reasons to as psychological and mental conditions where the patients will be irresponsible and they may not comply with the treatment recommendations by the dentist. Parafunctional habits such as clenching and grinding may lead to repeated lateral forces on the implants and may lead to failure of osseointegration or it may lead to fracture of the implants. Infections such as infections of endodontic or periodontal origin should be treated before initiating any implant therapy. Atrophic maxilla presently can be managed by sinus lift and bone augmentation procedures. Pre-treatment evaluation is a very important part of implant therapy. A comprehensive pre-treatment evaluation is indicated for any patient who has been considered for implant therapy. With the organized and systematic history and clinical examination will help in acquiring a proper diagnosis and will help in providing a treatment plan to the patient. Treatment plan should include several options, treatment options to the patient, and in consultation, patient should, the a clinician can decide with the patient the treatment option for the very that is appropriate for the patient can be selected. And this treatment option should include all the periodontal and endodontic treatment of the oral cavity, and if any bone deficiency is there should be identified and bone augmentation procedure or soft tissue augmentation procedure should be included and the cost also should be discussed with the patient. With the patient's chief complaint, try to understand the patient's chief concern and uh, patient's desire for treatment and patient's vision of successful outcome of successful result of the therapy. In patients with the high aesthetic expectations, and if the patient is having any lack of patient-related factors such as the lack of anatomical factors such as any bone deficiencies there, and if any soft tissue deficiency, if it is there, should be discussed with the patient. And if patient with the high aesthetic expectations, all this ridge augmentation procedure or soft tissue augmentation procedure should be carried on, and when the clinician should provide a proper aesthetic and functional restoration to the patient. A thorough medical history is indicated for any patient who has been considered for dental treatment, whether implants are part of the treatment or not. A thorough past medical history, past medications, past surgical therapy, present medical condition of the patient, present medication should be inquired, and appropriate laboratory investigation should be advised to the patient. If required, medical clearance for the surgery should be obtained from patient's treating physician. Intraoral examination should assess the condition of the condition and health of the existing teeth. There should be no pathological conditions should exist in the mouth. All the hard and soft tissue should be examined, and all the pathological conditions and lesions should be treated before initiating the implant therapy. The hard tissue should be examined with the visual examination as well as with the palpation, and identify if any bone deficiencies or any undercuts or any concavities of the ridge should be palpated and should be identified. Sometimes there may be some sufficient bone will be present, but it may not be in the proper position. That may be, that is, if the bone may be present too far buccally or too far lingually. It's required to augment this kind of bone and get the bone in required position so that implant can be placed in a proper prosthetically driven manner. The soft tissue deficiency should be identified. Mucogenital problems such as frenum deficiency, frenum problems should high frenal attachment should be identified, and if any soft tissue procedure is required, should be informed to the patient. Then the implant site should be examined for the height that is available, the intraocclusal height that is available, as well as the mesodistal and the buccolingual width that is available should be measured. The minimum intraocclusal space or the space required for the implant restoration is about 7 millimeters. The 7 millimeter of space is required for the restorative stack of the implant crown. If the edentulous area is left for a longer period of time, there may be sometimes supra-eruption of the teeth. If there is any supra-eruption, the endodontic treatment should be performed and the crown should be provided so as to achieve a proper occlusal plane as well as to obtain the proper space for the implant crown. The minimum mesodistal width required for placing a standard diameter implant is about 7 millimeters. That is, whenever there is a 7 millimeters of mesodistal space is present, one standard diameter implant of about 4 millimeter can be placed. If the mesodistal space is less, if it is about 6 millimeters, narrow diameter implant of about 3.25 millimeter can be placed. Or if the mesodistal width can be wider, it's about 8 to 9 millimeters, 5 or 6 millimeter implant can be, or a wide diameter implant can be placed. If the mesodistal width is about 14 millimeters, two standard diameter implants can be placed with the 2 millimeter space between the implants and 2 millimeter space between implant and the tooth. If the mesodistal space is about 12 millimeters, two narrow diameter implants can be placed. If it is less than 12 millimeter, only one wide diameter implant can be placed. A proper diagnostic model should be prepared and it should be mounted. This mounted diagnostic cast will help us in evaluating the prosthetic space that is available. That is the height available for the implant crown. That is about 7 millimeters should be present, and it will help in identifying the relationship of the occlusal table with the opposite jaw. Opposite jaw can be identified, and we can identify whether the implant can be placed in the prosthetically driven position, or if any bone deficiency is there, if the ridge is not in the proper position, can be identified. And the wax up model, after this wax up models, diagnostic wax up models, a surgical guide or a surgical stent can be prepared with the cold pure acrylic, and a hole should be drilled in the center of the occlusal table for the posterior teeth, or cingulum area for the anterior teeth, for the proper prosthetically driven position of the proper prosthetically driven surgical placement of the implants. That's why this surgical stent is prepared. Ultimately, the radiographic examination will determine whether it's possible to place the implant in that position. It will help in identifying assessing the amount of bone that is available and the quality of bone that is available. There are several radiographic projections that are available for treatment planning. That is standard implant surgical procedures, that is usually standard projections, radiographic projections that is usually available in the dental clinics, and the more complex radiographic projections usually available in the radiographic centers. These standard radiographic projections include two intraoral projections and two extraoral projections. The intraoral projections are intraoral periapical radiographs and the occlusal radiographs, and the extraoral projections include the panoramic radiographs and the lateral cephalometric radiographs. The more complex radiographic projections include the conventional X-ray tomography, computed tomography, and cone beam computed tomography. The intraoral periapical radiographs are very important part of implant therapy, which is used for pre-treatment evaluation. It is used during the surgical placement of the implants. It is used for during the prosthetic phase to check the proper seating of healing abutment or the prosthetic abutment or the implant prosthesis or the implant crown. The seating of the crown can be checked with the intraoral periapical radiographs, and also it helps in the post-operative evaluation to check the peri-implant bone, or to check the condition of the peri-implant bone, and to check if any further bone losses that can be checked with the intraoral periapical radiographs, because it's usually easily available in the dental clinics. The panoramic radiographs of the OPG is usually gives the picture of both maxilla and mandible. It provides the important anatomical landmarks such as the mandibular nerve, the mandible foramen, the nasal floor of the nasal cavity, the incisive foramen, and the floor of the maxillary sinus can be identified. It's very important to identify these anatomic landmarks and perform the implant surgery without traumatizing these important anatomical landmarks. And always this radiographic projection, radiographic picture should be always be examined in conjunction with the clinical examination. The more complex radiographic projections will help us in viewing the anatomical landmarks in a three-dimensional manner, and it provides the proper cross-sectional images. It's possible to accurately identify the buccolingual as well as the mesodistal dimension that is available. The superior inferior height that is available can be measured, and proper implant diameter can be selected. Proper implant height can be measured, and it can be kept ready for the surgery. The mandibular nerve can be identified with the more complex radiographic projections and three-dimensional projections, and we can identify the mandibular nerve. The buccolingual width of width can be identified, and the cervico superior inferior height can be identified, and the implant diameter and height can be selected. There are some simulation software programs that are available, such as interactive simulation software programs, which use data from CBCT or CT radiographs, and that helps in reformatting the maxilla or mandible on the computer screen. So it's possible to reformatting the maxilla or mandible by using the interactive simulation software programs. With that, we can identify the quantity and quality of bone, the implant diameter, implant height, the angulation of implant can be determined. If there is any bone deficiencies or during sinus augmentation procedures, the amount of bone, the quantity of bone graft that is required can be calculated. It's possible to simulate the restoration of the implants, these implants, and the amount of forces on the implant as well as on the adjacent bone can be calculated, and it's possible to prepare the surgical guides with these software programs. These are the surgical guides that are prepared with the by the implant companies through this interactive simulation software programs, and it is possible to prepare the the provisional restorations with these software programs. The companies manufacture these provisional restorations, and these can be connected to the implants immediately after placing the implant. This concept was known as Within an Hour by Nobel Biocare Company. This is about the interactive simulation software programs. Please make a note of it. Requirements for next we'll see the requirements for osseointegration. Most of these there are over 200 implant systems that are available worldwide, and the surgical procedures for most of these for almost all of these implant systems is based on the original work of Professor Per Ingvar Brennemark in 1960s, and which the fundamental principles of the fundamental principles provided by Per Ingvar Brennemark is that the surgery should be performed in an aseptic and atraumatic manner, and the osteotomy should be done in an incremental and progressive manner, and implant should be placed in a precise manner with the good initial stability, and they should be non-functionally loaded for about 2 to 4 months or 4 to 6 months. The implant surgeries can be performed in the dental clinic under local anesthesia, and all aseptic principles should be followed. With the patient should be draped, and the pre-surgical rinse of chlorhexidine gluconate should be given. The surgical site can be swabbed with the chlorhexidine gluconate, and the clinician should the implants are usually provided by the manufacturers in a sterile containers. It's very important for the clinician to not to contaminate these implants, and these implants should be placed into the osteotomies without contaminating them. And Implant site preparation should be completed with an atraumatic surgical technique that provides that avoids overheating of the bone during preparation of the recipient sites. It's very important to use the proper equipment such as a fizzy dispenser, which will control the feed as well as the torque and will provide a saline irrigation. And the implant site should be prepared in a incremental and progressive manner. And that is, the drilling should be done in a sequential manner without jumping from 2 millimeters to 4 millimeters, or the drill should be used in a sequential manner, that is from 2 to 0.8, 3.2, 3.65, and then the 4.2 drill should be used. And it's important to provide a continuous saline irrigation during the drilling procedure. Implant should be placed in the good initial stability. If the implant site is prepared precisely, the implant can achieve a good initial stability, and implant should be allowed to heal without loading or without micro movements for about 2 to 4 months when the bone is dense cortical bone, or when the bone is a loose trabecular bone. 4 to 6 months of healing period should be allowed. But presently, if the implants can achieve an initial stability of 40 to 45 Newton centimeter, the implants can also be connected with the provisional restorations, or implants can be loaded immediately with the non-functional loading. Next we'll see the surgical aspects of dental implants. The ultimate goal of dental implant therapy is to restore the missing teeth in a functional and aesthetic and secure and long-lasting manner. To provide a functional and aesthetic restoration, it's very important to surgically place the implants in a prosthetically driven manner. That's by preparing a surgical guide, and always use a surgical guide to place the implants in a surgically always place the implants in a prosthetically driven manner. If the implants are placed without any prosthetic prosthodontic consideration, or without prosthodontically uh, driven manner, then it will lead to functional aesthetic compromise of the restoration, and the patients are left with the less than optimal results. Basically, there are two implant surgical procedures. One is a one-stage surgical technique, and another one is a two-stage surgical technique. The one-stage surgical technique is also known as non-submerged. The two-stage surgical technique is known as submerged implant surgical technique. One-stage technique, the coronal portion of this portion stays exposed through the gingiva during the healing period, whereas in two-stage implant surgical technique, the top of the implant is completely submerged under gingiva, and the head of the implant needs to be surgically exposed with the second surgery. Basically, there are basically two implant designs. One is the implant that is designed for two-stage surgical technique, and the implant that is designed for one-stage surgical technique. Implant that is manufactured for two-stage surgical technique will have a short polish collar that's about 2 to less than 1 millimeter, or it may not have any polish collar. Here, the implant that is designed for one-stage surgical technique will have a long polish collar of about 2 to 3 millimeters. The implant that is designed for two-stage surgical technique can be placed up to the crest of the alveolar ridge, or it may be placed subcrustally. And after placing the implant, the cover screw is connected, and the soft tissues are sutured back so that the implant doesn't get exposed to the oral cavity. The two-stage surgical technique will have two surgical phases. That is, one is the implant placement surgery, other one is the implant exposure surgery. After the implants is placed and the soft tissues are covered, it's allowed to heal for about 2 to 4 months or 4 to 6 months. And once the healing takes place, the next is to perform the implant exposure surgery, where this buried implant under the soft tissue is exposed. The soft tissues are open, and the implant head is exposed, and the cover screw is removed, and the healing abutment is connected, or the gingiva former is connected, and the soft tissues are sutured around it. And again, these soft tissues are allowed to heal for about 2 to 3 weeks. And after this healing period, the impression of this implant is taken and the crown is manufactured in the crown is fabricated in the lab, and the implant abutment is connected and the crown is connected to the implants either by cement or by a screw. It can be cemented prosthesis or it can be screw retained prosthesis. The implant that is designed for one stage surgical technique will have a long polish collar of about 2 to 3 millimeters, and is on the when this implant is placed, all the threads should be placed within the alveolar bone, and when it is placed fully, the 2 to 3 millimeters of polish collar will remain above the crest of the alveolar bone, and the soft tissues are adapted and sutured around this polish collar so that the implant head remains exposed to the oral cavity. If we can achieve a sufficient torque of about 40 to 45 Newton centimeter, and provisional restorations can also be connected to this implant. The implant that is designed for two-stage surgical technique can also be placed with the one-stage surgical technique by placing the implant. After placing the implant, if you can achieve a good initial stability of 40 to 45 Newton centimeter, the healing abutment or the gingival former is connected immediately after placing the implant, and the soft tissues are sutured around the healing abutment or the gingival former. If we can achieve a good initial stability, as I said earlier, the provisional restorations also can be provided presently. So there are, as I said earlier, there are basically two surgical techniques for the placement of implants. One is a two-stage surgical technique, which will include two phases. One is implant placement surgery, and the second one is implant exposure surgery, where the implant is exposed and the healing abutment is connected. The one-stage surgical technique will include only one stage, where with this one stage, the implant will remain exposed to the oral cavity, and there is no need to perform the second surgical procedure, so that it is more comfortable for the patient, and is placed whenever there is a good quality of bone, and the advantage of two-stage surgical technique is whenever there is a bone quality is not good, or when there is a loose trabecular bone, or when the bone augmentation procedures are required, two-stage surgical technique is preferred. Whereas in one-stage surgical technique, the flap management is easier, and it's more comfortable for the patient because less surgeries are involved. The advantage of one-stage surgical approach are that the mucogingival management around the implant is easier, patient comfort increases because less surgeries are involved, and aesthetic management is easier. If extensive bone augmentation is necessary and bone quality is poor, then two-stage surgical approach is recommended. Flap management is different for both one and two-stage surgical approaches. In two-stage implant surgical approach, the first stage surgery ends by suturing the soft tissues over the implant so that it remains extruded from the oral cavity. In the second stage surgery, the buried implant is uncovered and the titanium abutment is connected to allow access to the oral cavity. In the one-stage implant surgery, a second intervention is not needed because the implant is left exposed after first surgery. Let's see the step-by-step procedure for the two-stage endosseous implant surgery. Here we'll see the first stage surgery, that is the implant placement surgery. So as I said earlier, it can be performed in the dental clinics after attaining sufficient anesthesia. The first step is to place the incisions. Incisions can be either crustal incision or a remote incision. In one-stage surgical technique, always a crustal incision is preferred, whereas in two-stage surgical technique, both crustal as well as the remote incision can be performed. After the incision, the full thickness mucoperiosteal flaps are reflected and up to the mucogingival junction, and these flaps can be either sutured to the buccal mucosa or to the adjacent teeth. And then the surgical stent is placed, which we are prepared during the pre-treatment evaluation, which will help in surgically placing the implants in a prosthetically driven manner. So once you place the surgical guide or the surgical stent, a round burr or a lancet drill can be used to mark the implant site. And once the implant site is marked, the surgical guide is removed and look for the mesodistal and the buccolingual position of this mark. If it is if it is not in a suitable position, it can be slightly modified, but make sure it is in a prosthetically driven position. Then it can be marked to a depth of 1 to 2 millimeters. Then the pilot drill or a 2 millimeter twist drill can be used. The purpose of using 2 millimeter twist drill is to establish the depth of osteotomy and to align the implants or the implant osteotomies. Once this drilling is done with the 2 millimeter twist drill, a paralleling pin can be placed and look for the alignment of the implant. If it is not well aligned, it can be modified and it can be brought to the proper alignment. At this stage, a intraoral periapical radiograph can be taken, and the relationship with the important anatomical landmarks such as the mandibular nerve or the floor of the maxillary sinus can be checked. There should be at least 2 millimeter of gap should be there for the safety of these important anatomical landmarks. Once the depth and alignment is proper, a sequential drilling should be done. That is, sequential incremental drilling can be done. That is 2 millimeter. If suppose 4.2 millimeter implant is to be placed, the drilling should be done from 2.2 millimeter, 2.8 millimeter, 3.2, 3.65, and then the 4.2 diameter drills should be used in a sequential manner, and that will prevent the overheating of the bone. And the drilling should be done in a pumping manner. That is, always the drill should be taken out. That will help in removing the clogged bone, and it will help in exposing the drills to the saline, so that is to reduce the overheating of the drills. Once the drilling is done, if the implant is need to be placed subcrustally, a countersink drill can be used. This countersink drill will help in enlarging the osteotomy at the crustal part. Then the screw tab can be used. That will form the threads on the internal part of the osteotomy. This is especially used when the bone is dense or if a longer implant is to be placed. This screw tab can be used. Presently, the most of the implants that are available are self-tapping implants, and this screw tab may be not required if bone is not dense and if the implants are self-tapping. After this preparation of the osteotomy, the implants can be placed either motor driven or initially they can be placed with the motor driven, and final torquing can be done with the hand driven wrenches, surgical wrench or the prosthetic wrench. And the cover screw is placed and the sutures and the flaps are sutured back. This is a remote incision where the suture will not remain on the head of the implant. So the first stage surgical technique, flap design and incisions. There are two types of incisions, crustal incision and remote incision. In the flap elevation, a full thickness mucoperiosteal flap is raised buccally and lingually to the level of the mucogingival junction, exposing the alveolar ridge. Elevated flaps may be sutured to the buccal mucosa or to the opposing teeth to keep the surgical site open during surgery. For knife edge ridges with the sufficient alveolar height and distance from the vital structures, such as the sinuses, inferior alveolar nerve, or the mantle nerve, a suitable round burr is used to recontour the bone to provide reasonably flat bed for the implant site. So, whenever there is a knife edge ridge with a sufficient height from the vital structures, it is possible to recontour the bone with the round burr and then to provide so as to provide a flat bed. Whenever there is no sufficient height is present, this bone should be used for bone augmentation procedures. Implant placement. Once the implant site is prepared, a surgical guide or stent is placed intraorally, and a small round burr or a spiral drill is used to mark the implant sites. The site is then marked to a depth of 1 to 2 millimeter, breaking through the cortical bone. A small spiral drill, usually 2 millimeter in diameter, is used to establish the depth and to align the axis of the implant recipient site. When multiple implants are used to support one prosthesis, a paralleling or direction indicating pin should be used to align the subsequent implants correctly. Implants should be at least 3 millimeters apart to ensure sufficient room for adequate oral hygiene. The next step is to use a series of drills to systematically widen the size to accommodate the selected size of the implant. This is a intraoperative radiograph, or this radiograph is taken during the surgical placement of the implants. These are the paralleling pins which are placed inside the osteotomies. This will help in identifying the relationship with the adjacent teeth or relationship with the important anatomical landmarks such as the mandibular nerve, and to check the parallelism between these pins. Especially paralleling these osteotomies need to be parallel when multiple implants are need to be connected with a single prosthesis. Closure of the flap. Inverted mattress and inverted mattress sutures, closure of the flap without tension, postoperative care. When a single implant is or two implants are placed, it's not required to use any antibiotics, but patients are pre-medicated with antibiotics, amoxicillin 500 milligrams 3 times daily, starting immediately before surgery and continuing for at least 1 week afterwards if multiple implants are used or when a periosteal releasing incisions are used. Apply ice pack extraorally intermittently for first 24 hours. Fluoxetine gluconate mouth rinse twice daily. Adequate analgesics, liquid or semi-soft diet for the first few days. This is a clinical picture of a case with the missing second premolar and the first molar. The initial incision is crustal incision is given here with the clavicular incision on the distal aspect of the first premolar and a vertical incision or the papilla preserving type of incision for the mesial aspect of the second molar. And these type of incisions are used especially for the anterior teeth so as to maintain the integrity of the papilla. So this is a reflection of the full thickness mucoperiosteal flaps, and the papilla remains intact. Then the usage of the surgical guide, and then the round burr is used to mark the implant site, and then the sequential drilling, and then the using the pilot drill of 2 millimeter diameter. Once the depth and alignment is established, the piloting pins are placed. At this stage, you can take a radiograph and check for the relationship with the adjacent roots as well as for the important anatomical landmarks. If multiple implants need to be placed, they need to be connected with a single prosthesis, they should be parallel to each other. Presently, there are angled abutments that are available with the angulation of 17 degree or up to 30 degree angled abutments are available. So that if any angulation can be managed, but preferably they should be parallel to each other. Then the sequential drilling and the placement of implant. This is the cover screw that is placed, and then the soft tissues are sutured with interrupted sutures so that implants remains completely submerged under the gingiva and they are not exposed to the oral cavity, and this is allowed to heal for about 2 to 4 months for a dense cortical bone and 4 to 6 months for the loose trabecular bone, and then the second stage surgery is performed. The objectives of second stage surgery is to expose the submerged implants without damaging the surrounding bone or without damaging the head of the implant, and to control the thickness of the hard and thickness of the soft tissue surrounding the implant, to preserve or create attached keratinized tissue around the implant so as to facilitate the oral hygiene, ensure proper abutment seating, and to preserve the soft tissue aesthetics. There are basically 3 techniques that are available for second stage surgery. That is a punch biopsy technique, which is usually done whenever there is a sufficient amount of keratinized tissue, a circular punch of tissue that is excised, and the implant head is exposed, the cover screw is removed, it's nicely irrigated with saline, and then the healing abutment is connected. It's allowed to heal for about 2 to 3 weeks. After the healing, impression of the implant head is taken, and then the process is fabricated in the dental lab, and this is connected to the implant. Either it can be cement retained or it can be screw retained. We can note the proper emergence of the crown, proper placement of the implants, and the functional and aesthetic restoration, and as well as the good emergence profile of this implant crown with a good amount of keratinized tissue. Full thickness flap is indicated whenever there is bone growth over the head of the implant. Partial thickness flap, reposition flap is performed whenever there is a lack of keratinized tissue, and whenever there is lack of keratinized tissue, the initial incision is the crustal incision can be placed, and then it can be placed slightly lingually if whenever there is lack of keratinized tissue on the buccal side, and then the mesial and distal incisions are placed, and a partial thickness flap is raised, leaving the periosteum and the part of the connective tissue intact over the bone. And this flap, partial thickness flap is raised and mobilized, and it is placed apically. If more keratinized tissue is required, pharyngeal grafting can also be done, and so as to increase the width of keratinized tissues. A similar flap can be raised on the lingual side, but usually these lingual flaps are more fragile and more delicate. It's easier to perform a full thickness flap on the lingual side. Whenever there is a lot of tissue on the above the head of the implant, gingivectomy procedure can also be done to reduce the thickness of the soft tissues. Here is a diagrammatic illustration showing the more lingual placement of the initial incision, and then the two incisions are placed mesially and distally, and then the partial thickness flap is raised, and the flap is sutured to the periosteum, and the connective tissue is left over the bone, and this mobilized flap is sutured to the emerging head of the implant, and then the healing abutment is connected. Here is a clinical picture with the lack of keratinized tissue. Here is a vertical incision placed with the mesial and distal vertical incisions, and a partial thickness flap is elevated, and the implant head is exposed with the gingivectomy technique, and the cover screws are exposed, and the cover screws are removed, and it is nicely irrigated with saline, and then the healing abutments are connected, and it is allowed to heal for about 2 to 3 weeks for these tissues to heal, and then the impression is made, and the crown is fabricated in the lab. This is the screw retained implant crown that is connected to the implants with the screw. You can notice the good amount of keratinized tissue after the crowns are placed. Next, we'll see the one-stage endosseous implant surgery. The basic difference between one-stage and two-stage endosseous implant surgery is only the flap management, but the drilling sequence is all same like the two-stage endosseous implant surgery. In the one-stage endosseous implant surgery, usually a crustal incision is preferred, and a full thickness flap can be raised. Before reflecting the full total reflection of the flap, the tissues can be made thin by providing a similar incisions around in the implant areas so that flaps do not cover the head of the implant. This is where the thinning of the flap is especially done in the posterior areas, but in anterior areas the thinning of the flap is not done so that it doesn't expose the metal collar of the implants, which will be anesthetic to the patient. So after that, the drilling sequence is same like the two-stage endosseous implant surgery. All the threads should be covered by then the implant should be placed, and all the threads of the implant should be covered by bone, and then only the polished collar will remain above the crest of the alveolar bone, and the flaps are adapted around the polished collar, and then they are sutured around the polished collar. The one-stage implants protrude about 2 to 3 millimeters from the bone crest, and the flap is thinned and placed apical to the future margin of the prosthesis. One-stage implants do not remain submerged under the gingiva, therefore do not require a second or uncovering procedure. In two-stage technique, implant is placed flush with the bone crest, and the soft tissue covering it purposely kept thick to minimize the chances of premature exposure of the cover screw. Flap design and incisions. Always a crustal incision bisecting the existing keratinized tissues. Facial and lingual flaps in the posterior areas should be carefully thinned before total reflection so that the thickness of the soft tissues doesn't cover the head of the implant. In anterior or other aesthetic areas of the mouth, the soft tissue is not thinned in order to prevent the metal collar from showing. Flap elevation is full thickness flaps are elevated facially and lingually. Placement of the implant and the drilling sequence is similar to the two-stage implant surgical technique which you have seen. And the closure of the flaps. Flaps are tied with independent sutures around the implant. When there is abundant amount of keratinized tissue, scalloping around the implants provide better flap adaptation, and the post-operative care is similar to that is with the two-stage implant surgical technique. We'll see the advanced implant surgical technique in the next session. So I will wind up here. I'll continue with the one more session for advanced implant surgical technique.